in October podcast where we talk about all things college football. We are your hosts. I'm Evan.
I'm Cameron.
Here we go. So, just like always, we're going to start out here with our records from last week and then go into some thoughts from the week before. Um, Another pretty good week, although some unexpected losses in there. I went 9-3 last week with losses on the Ole Miss Florida game, the Auburn A&M game, and then of course probably like everybody the Alabama Oklahoma game. How'd you do?
Well, I can say as a Bama fan and as somebody who said Bama was going to win last week, I definitely lost that one. But as a grand total, I went 8-4. So my four losses, I had Notre Dame, I had Army winning. Uh, Statistically speaking, I think we could all kind of go into, was Army actually as good as we thought they could be, or are they more of the Indiana complex going in to play a good opponent? And I think we kind of found out what that was actually like.
Yeah,
I picked Ole Miss to beat Florida.
kind of like
Shocker.
everybody.
Yep. And then I actually picked Minnesota to beat Penn State, which I don't detract my pick. Evan, I know that you were giving me a hard time. A pick is a pick, and you're right. But I felt that that was a pretty good one. I'll take my
All,
1 point
all I'm
loss
saying
on that one.
is you yeah you lost a win
I
win's a
did.
win.
I did.
Nice, cool. Who else? Is that it?
That's it. The rest of them I won. I went 8-4, like I said. Do you want me to go through? I'll go through general thoughts first, kind of
Yeah,
on
yeah.
my.
You kick us off there.
Yeah. So for the Big Ten, if everyone wins this week, there are going to be four teams from the Big Ten that are in there. Uh,
Absurd, by the way.
it's crazy how we were talking about. There's like six teams from the SEC that are going to make the champion or make the playoff, and now that's very much changed. But you have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana. If Oregon loses the Big Ten title to Ohio State, they will still make the playoff. If Ohio State loses to Oregon again, which I don't think that they will, neither do the odds favorites, uh, but I think they would probably still be in the playoff as well. Again, you're
And
going to have four teams in from the Big Ten.
all right, and so that leads to kind of one of my points too. Indiana, we said they were overrated going into this week or going into last week, and again, proved to be true. You got to explain to me when the playoff committee is supposed to be looking at strength of schedule, and you have someone like Indiana who's ranked five. You know what? Fine, they were 10-0. They can't do anything about their schedule for them not having played a single ranked opponent the entire year. But they finally play one, and it's a pretty good Ohio State team, and they just get dominated. Weren't they under 200 yards of total offense the entire game?
It was bad. It
It,
was
it's
generally speaking a very bad game.
so how is it that they are still going to make the playoffs? I think I saw they still had like a 95 or 98% chance to make it. That doesn't make any sense.
So let's take a small step back. Uh, you have maximum chaos occurring in the rest of the country right now.
The
As
whole
of last week, it was a very different conversation. You had Alabama and Ole Miss and Tennessee all vying for spots in the playoff. And the statement that was made is if all of those teams went out, yes, the SEC championship could theoretically define one team that actually gets knocked because they would have three losses, but we didn't account for the fact that those teams would lose. So yeah, when you have an Alabama and an Ole Miss and a Texas A&M all drop out, yeah, a one-loss Indiana team really doesn't look all that bad. At the end of the day, who is Miami beaten? Kind of a similar story. Their strength of schedule is not really everything that it's cracked up to be. We need a better way to determine the strength of schedule versus just a win is a win. A win is not just a win.
it
Uh,
that's yeah, I agree. It's I don't know. In my head, it's one of those things where obviously we're going to kind of look back on this and say probably the first team out could probably beat Indiana, but that's neither here nor there. One of my big points for the week is the playoff committee is going to be the most unpopular committee in the history come this week and next week and onwards. It's going to be, I don't envy their job at all.
you know what the problem is? The problem is, I was talking to somebody about this recently, and they said the issue is that it's too complex for a team to get in. I said no, it's 100% the opposite. The issue is that it's too simple. There's no criteria. The eye test is a vague statement that's made by people in a sitting boardroom. There's really no criteria by which they can actually decide. At the end of the day, this is all dollars and cents of which team is going to bring the most potential. And yeah, it's really hard to leave. Like, let's say Oregon goes 13-0. You can't leave them out. Like, they deserve to be there. They were excellent. But a three-loss Alabama team is going to bring a lot more revenue than a one-loss Indiana team. And while
Right.
that isn't the statement that they want to make on ESPN or anywhere else, I guarantee you that
True.
is definitely a statement going on in the back room.
It's so true, and that's one of the things where everybody always gets so upset for, like in Alabama, always finding a way to make it in, or whatever it is, and saying, well, they've got so and so in their back pocket. The truth is, it's true to an extent. They're gonna bring the money. At the end of the day, it's a business. It is what it is. So
Just
I
ask
don't
Johnny
envy.
Manziel. It's all about the money.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I don't envy them at all going forward, because no matter what, they're going to be unpopular. Whether they leave Indiana in, which they will, or take them out, either way, it's going to be a bad decision for whoever could have been in.
So I want to cover one more thing before we go to next week's picks. There are two teams that I genuinely feel deserve just a huge call out for being where they are right now comparatively to what their record actually shows. They both play this week. I will get into one of them a little bit more in a little bit. But for the Florida Gators and the South Carolina Gamecocks, both of those teams are probably the most underrated teams in the country that you do not want to play right now. I,
I would
I,
highly
it,
agree with you on the Florida situation. It doesn't make any sense to me, and Napier has found a way to secure another year in his job
he's looking at a 7-win schedule
in the
this
hardest
year.
schedule in all of college
I
football
had to
in the
write this
entire
down.
history.
I mean, Miami, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State, who preseason looked excellent. I mean, that schedule was never conducive to honestly a bowl game, and they have potential to go 7-5 this year.
Yeah, I
Billy
don't.
deserves a lot of credit.
Billy does deserve a lot more credit than I would like to give him. Just for the fact that there's no arguing. I don't necessarily think that Florida's a great team by any means, but they are just scrappy and they know how to they can
You
win.
don't want to play them.
You do not want to play them at
Yeah.
all. Yeah. Cool. Well, why don't we go ahead and start off our picks for this week? I'll start us off, and again, like every week, we're gonna kind of break it down by conference. So starting with the independent G5, we're gonna go through and pick pretty much just the top 12 for the week. Obviously, we're doing this before the playoff rankings out, but we can make some pretty educated guesses here. Up first, we got Notre Dame at USC. Notre Dame, they got really good towards the end of the season. You and I both said in last week that it was going to be a low scoring game between Notre Dame and Army, two of the best defenses in the league, not necessarily the best offense, and they destroyed Army. In fact, they need to write a written apology to the White House because they took Army out. That was impressive and sad all at the same time because I think we were all rooting for Army to somehow get into the playoffs. USC, they were kind of up and down at the beginning of the season, and then it's just been down the rest of the time. I know Lincoln Riley needs a win over there at USC. I don't think it's going to come from a Notre Dame team that has gotten so much better every single week, and I feel like they're just trying to make a statement right now that they deserve to be in that top five spot.
I pretty well agree with you. I actually had to dive in and I looked at some of just the raw analytics of this. Did you know Notre Dame has actually outscored their opponents since the Northern Illinois game, 4-1 overall? It's
Yep,
392-99. They haven't even let up 100 points over a 10-game span or 9-game span.
that is
They've been excellent.
that is so impressive, especially given I think the storyline after last week is going to be their offense, but the storyline for the entire season is their defense. Army, who came in at one of the top five for offense overall, especially number one in rushing, only scored a touchdown, right, in the whole
Correct.
game. That's
Uh,
pretty good. and it wasn't even at Notre Dame. It was a neutral site field.
Yep.
So
It,
it was an impressive win.
the only thing I want to call out two things. Riley Leonard has played excellently all year. I honestly don't understand how he's not more involved in the Heisman conversation. Uh, this guy has 2,000 yards, 14 touchdowns, and only four picks. And on top of that, he has 700 yards on the ground, plus another 13 touchdowns. I mean, he has played excellent ball the entire season. And I know we look at some of these other dual threats. Using Milrow as an example. Riley Leonard has played far more efficiently and just better as a whole all season. And while, yeah, his ceiling may not be quite as high, he's been amazing. Uh, on the USC side of the ball, though, I think Woody Moss could potentially give you a game in this one. And you alluded to it a minute ago. If USC wants to win for their coach and they want Lincoln for one more year, because I don't know that he has much more in him, I think you got to get a win here. That said, I agree with you. I think Notre Dame wins this game. I actually think it's going to be a pretty competitive game. Uh, Maybe 7 to 10 points. USC has been involved. I think it was in like 5 games this year that were decided by 7 points or less.
Yeah,
So this could
it's
be
at
another really hard one.
yeah, it's at USC. If this were at Notre Dame, I think it would be a very different ball game. But it's going to be at USC, and I think it's going to be kind of an emotional game for pretty much all of South California. So it could be close. I think it might be closer to that 10 point digit mark, but who knows? Notre Dame could come out like they did against Northern Illinois, or they could come out like they did against Army. I think it's going to be the latter, and it's going to be a big win.
All right. So we just talked about Notre Dame. I'm going to go ahead and segue to our next one, which is Oregon State at Boise State. Uh, this one's actually really interesting. Did you know, Evan, that Oregon State has already clinched their conference title?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, the Pac 2, I think it is still technically called the Pac 12. No idea why. They clinched last week when they beat Washington State. Uh, so Oregon State actually is kind of a fluky team here, and it may almost be worth talking about Boise State first. Over the last 3 weeks of the Boise State season, they went from being excellent on offense, excellent on defense, to a bit of a fading off. Even last week, I think they only beat Wyoming by 4 points.
And that's with Ashton Genty putting up
180
172
yards on
yards.
the ground again.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy, and it reminds me of what I've seen a lot of people talk about in basketball, right? Where there's one player who puts up 40 points. Usually, that means that the other people on the team are just not contributing, and that's the case here. They've been riding Genty the entire season, and it's starting to show.
It is, and that week over week load really is there. That said, I actually think this is where Boise finally goes down. I'm picking Oregon State in this one. I think Boise State hasn't had a bye week in 6 weeks. I think it's really showing they really need it, and there's a conference title next week. I think this is the game that they lose.
Yeah, I'm picking Boise State, and this is kind of like with last week with Florida. I kind of want to pick Oregon State. The only reason I can't is because they just don't have any really good wins the entire season. I mean, Oregon State is, if they're going to upset somebody's season, it's going to come now. Even then, it's really not going to be that big of an upset. And that's why I do think it could possibly go the other way. Boise State, they're not really playing for much right now. They've already locked up their conference championship. If they make that, they're probably going to
Oregon
be
State locked up. Well, are you meaning into the conference title game?
into the conference title. Sorry,
Sorry.
and if they win that game, which they most likely will, they will probably be one of the top seeded conference champions, and they're going to make it to the playoffs. That's kind of the only reason that I could see this not really being a trap game, but not one that Boise State's going to get up for. That being said, it's at Boise State. That's going to help out a lot. Genty's trying to make a statement for that Heisman. So I'm going to pick Boise State, but I would not be surprised if this goes the other way. So,
First disagreement.
yeah, I know. Moving on over to the Big Ten, we've got Maryland at Penn State. I don't have a whole lot to say about this. Maryland, maybe the last year or the year before, I would say that this could be a game. Penn State did not look that great last week against Minnesota. I'll give you that. They did pull it out, but this one's at Penn State. It's at home. It's last game of the year. I don't think that this is going to be close. I think Maryland is going to go down pretty heavily. They could make it a game in the first quarter, but after that, I just don't see it with it being at home.
I think Penn State would struggle mightily against a team that could score, like a full team. Maryland has had a couple of games this year where they've actually put up some points. I don't think they're going to do it over Penn State. I think you're right on the right track. Penn State can score. They have a great defense. I really don't think Maryland's going to do much. I know they do have a passing game, but it's kind of floundered later in the season. Uh, yeah, Penn State, don't think this is much of a good matchup.
No.
All right, segueing over Purdue at Indiana. Uh, did you know that we have talked about Purdue for 3 out of the last 5 weeks?
That's incredible.
Actually, I think it's, yeah, 3 out of 5. And in the other 3 times that they have played, so this would be the 4th, in the other 3 times they've played, they have lost by a combined score of 129 to 10. Folks, this is a really, and I don't like saying this about people's programs. There's jobs on the line. These are kids in school trying to make the best that they can. This Purdue team is genuinely very bad. You're going to have a pissed off Indiana team that wants to prove a point. They have to prove a point. I can't imagine a game I would rather have late in the season than playing a 1-10 Purdue team that has seemingly had its heart ripped out the entire year. I think this is a very easy win for Indiana.
All I heard from from being outscored is that they could score 10 points. I don't know.
In 3 games. They're averaging just over 3 points a game. You got that right?
if there were ever a time for the spoiler makers to make a comeback and just knock Indiana out of contention,
are you taking them?
It's not going to happen.
Are you taking them?
Absolutely not. But if there was ever a time, it would be this game right here. It's not going to happen. Indiana, they're going to come out really ticked off. They are pretty much already a lock for the playoffs, which, whatever. I don't necessarily understand that, but it's not going to be close. It's just not even fun to talk about anymore. But I do love Purdue. All right, now we got a classic rivalry that I think is going to be kind of a boring one for this week. We got Michigan at Ohio State. Look, Michigan is just not good this year. They're just not. Historically, I would. All right, I'll say this: it's rivalry week. Teams get up and play a lot better than they're supposed to. That being said, if this were at Michigan, I think it would be a different storyline. I think it could be close. I still think Ohio squeaks it out then, and pretty clearly wins. But the fact that it's at Ohio State, you got a new, it's just not going to happen. Michigan's going to get absolutely killed in this game.
Jim Harbaugh himself couldn't convince me that Michigan has hope here. This is Ryan Day has been looking forward to this game for 4 years since the last time he won. Ohio State by like 30 points or more. I think this is an absolutely emphatic win. And I do want to point one thing out. If Ohio State somehow managed to blunder this and lose, I don't think they will. I think Ryan Day's head will be on the chopping block.
Yeah, this is one of those games that if you're an Ohio State fan, you have to have your coach win. You absolutely have to, and they haven't won in the last 3 years. So, yeah. The only way Michigan has a chance is if Harbaugh takes some of his NFL players and figures out how to sneak them onto the field.
Biggest stat line difference on this one. Michigan is actually the worst of all of the Michigan schools, including Western Michigan, Central Michigan, and Michigan State this year, averaging under 20 points a game. Ohio State is averaging just under 40. That alone should pretty well prove kind of what's coming.
Yeah.
All right. Next one we've got Oregon at Washington. Can Washington play to the standard of last year for one game this season? That would be Oregon's worst nightmare if they could. Honestly, that would be really crazy to watch for the remainder of college football or for the rest of the field. Uh, I really don't think it's going to happen, though. Oregon's keys to success this week, a much needed week off after the Wisconsin scare. Way to actually pull that one out a couple of weeks ago. I think that really showed a lot. Put the ball on the ground with Jordan James. Let him absolutely tear it up. Oregon State has the number 102 rushing defense in the country. Expose it all day long. I really think that's kind of the keys to
Oregon
win
State or
here.
Washington?
Oh my goodness. Yes, that is Oregon's running back. Run it all over Washington's defense. I
Figured.
think
Yeah.
I think it'll be there all day long. Uh,
Look, honestly, look, Oregon's coming off a bye week that they much needed. They went through an absolute gauntlet this whole season and had like the longest stretch without a bye week of anybody, and they still found a way to win. They barely beat Wisconsin, but it was at Wisconsin. There's some things that can be said. This is not the Washington team from last year by any stretch of the imagination.
there's one exception to
Oregon's going
that.
to squeak it out.
There's one exception to that, Evan, that you're just completely missing over. Do you know who Washington's quarterback is?
Uh, Whoever Penix's backup was, probably.
No, no, it's not. He's a man, a legend, and a pirate. He's going to pull in the heart and the spirit of Mike Leach in this game. It's Will Howard. I still don't think he's going to win, but it
No,
would be really cool if Will Howard, after transferring in and having a pretty crazy couple of years in school, is able to pull this off. Don't think it's going to happen, but
but
that'd
it
be
would be
really
cool.
cool.
It would
That
be
would be
cool.
cool.
And let's be honest. I mean, college football is in such turmoil right now that if this did happen, it wouldn't even surprise me at this point. If Washington pulled out an upset, there's no reason for them to, other than the fact that uh, watching
Full
this
pirate
past
mode.
weekend. Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that watching this last weekend is might light something under them, and they think that they can actually beat number one Oregon, but I don't think it's going to happen.
It's not a good matchup.
No. All
All
right, take
right,
us over to the ACC.
you got it for the ACC. I've got Cal at SMU. Uh, SMU this season has really played great all year. They had one small blunder early on. As of right now, they're number two in the ACC. It's looking very likely like them and the next team we're going to talk about with Miami are going to be our two teams playing in the ACC championship, which will be a really fun game to watch. Cal has been pretty not great all year. Don't really see any reason to dive too deep into this one. SMU ends up winning it, I think, by probably 15, 20 points.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Cal's not very good this year. SMU, I don't know how this is the first time that we've been able to talk about them on the podcast, just because so many things have happened this whole year. But yeah, I just like SMU. SMU is going to absolutely destroy Cal and then find their way into the ACC championship. Over to Miami at Syracuse, which is an actually interesting game. I think we're both kind of eager to talk about this one. Miami, they have not looked very good the last few weeks. They had that loss to Georgia Tech, and they really just Cam Ward just has not been able to lead them to a very 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 solid victory since then. That being said, Syracuse on the other side is a lot better than I think most people would realize. They have what is it, 7 or 8 wins this season so far already. It's at Syracuse. Yep, they got 8 wins. It's at Syracuse. Something cool could kind of happen. They could really want to mess up some things for a lot of other people in this game. I don't think this is a gimme for Miami at all. Syracuse has a really good offense. Miami has a great defense, but we talked about this before. Miami doesn't like to wrap up tackles. They like to hit as hard as possible. If Syracuse can shed a couple tackles and break off a couple big plays, Miami might find themselves with their backs up against the wall, just like they did at Georgia Tech, and then they won't be able to squeak it out. They don't do well in these close games.
What's your
That being
pick?
said, that being said, I am picking Miami just because they've got a lot to play for right now, and They really, really, really need to be in this ACC championship game. If they lose this game, they're out of the ACC championship, and I think they're probably out of the playoffs.
I'm so glad that you picked Miami because it's another
Oh,
one I
I
get
knew
to
you. I knew
disagree
you
with
would
you
be.
on. Yeah, no. Do you know who Syracuse's quarterback is? You know a name?
Go for it.
It's a man by the name of Kyle McCord. That is Ohio State's quarterback from last year. The man has absolutely lit it up this year. He has 4,000 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, and 12 picks. Sure, he has a couple more picks than I think he'd like to admit, uh, but he's been one step short of excellent for a not historically great Syracuse program. Cam Ward, awesome. Rest of the team, it's kind of looking like 2016 Louisville with Lamar Jackson at the helm.
Yeah.
In this game, I'm outwardly going to take Syracuse to win. I think this is going to be a huge win for that program. I think it's going to be a lightning show to watch. I could see this game being like a 45 to
I
52
was gonna
type of
say, I think
game.
the over under on this game could be like 100.
Yeah, and the
This
number of big plays that we know are coming. If
it's
you
gonna be a
enjoy high
lot.
flying offenses, this is it. It's not going to
Yeah,
get any better.
if you are if you're a corner going into this game, you are not happy at all.
Mm-mm.
This is going to be you're going to be exposed at every level on both sides of this. Cam Ward's going to expose you over there. Howard's going to expose you on the other side. It's going to be a shootout.
The other thing I'm really excited for in this game is just you mentioned it. What happens to the ACC if Syracuse
Chaos.
does pull this upset? Yeah, it would be pretty crazy to watch.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I get to talk about my home team who did so bad last week. So Auburn at Alabama. Uh, Having attended the University of Alabama and gone to a few Iron Bowls myself, this is always the game that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Either team can go 1-10, the other team can go 11-0, and this is a competitive matchup. We saw last week what happens when you shut down the Jalen Milroe run. When Milroe is rushing for under 30 yards a game, that has been the three times we've lost this season. That's to Vandy, that's to Tennessee, and now it's to Oklahoma. So you want the keys to success for Auburn? That's it. Shut them down. Jarquez Hunter, I think, is the exact answer on the opposite side of the ball. He's been excellent the entire season. Auburn's defense has also started to stand up. Now, what I question, Alabama is going to come in angry. This is a home game for Alabama. Auburn is coming off of a huge momentous win from last week against a very good Texas A&M program with Mike Elko at the helm. Wow. If
Darn.
I had to, as a betting man, I think I would take Alabama. But with the way that everything has ebbed and flowed this entire season, I have no idea what to expect out of this game.
Yeah, this I okay. I'll say this right up front. I do think Alabama's going to win, but I've watched enough Iron Bowls over the year, most of them with you, to know anything can happen in this game. And you look at going back to when Alabama lost to Vandy. They came back the next week. They won against South Carolina, but it was ugly and only by 2 points. I do think Alabama's going to win this game, but I could see this being another 2 to 3 point difference.
And it's weird to think Alabama's, we acknowledge with three losses, they are not making the SEC title game.
Mm-hmm.
This is a statement win. If DeBoer wants a shot at the playoff, the only way into that game, or into the playoff in general, you've got to make a statement in this game. Quite
Yeah,
honestly, I think if you win by 30 or less, you're probably not in. If you absolutely eviscerate Hugh Freeze and send him back to his cow pasture of a home, I think it's going to be a great day in Tuscaloosa, and I think the odds for the playoff are probably go up from what are they now? 20%, probably all the way up to 50.
yeah. It's just like the Ohio State Michigan game, right? DeBoer needs this win. He has to beat Auburn. He's already
Yep.
lost to their other rival Tennessee this year, right? That didn't look very good. This one, he's got to destroy a not very good Auburn team. That being said, Auburn did find a way to kind of embarrass A&M last week. So I don't know. Anything could happen. This is at Alabama though. If this were at Auburn, I I might flip flop the other way because I do think it's going to be a pretty close game.
I'm so glad that we did this so that I get to cover Alabama first and you get to cover Tennessee first.
Yeah, I like to give that to you. Yeah, okay. All right, over to Tennessee Vandy. All right, I'll say it as a Tennessee fan, I'm nervous for this because Vandy 2024 Vandy makes no sense to anybody in college football. I do think Tennessee is going to win this game, right? They just had pretty much a cleanup game against UTEP this past week to figure out a couple things on offense. They came out slow in that first quarter. You know, you and I were there, but after that, it was just lights out on both sides. Vandy though, they've got a guy at the helm that is a pretty good quarterback. He's pretty good. They've
We
already
all like
beat.
Pavia.
We all like Pavia. He might be ticked off because he just lost his lawsuit against the NCAA. Who knows? But he's going to come out with some fire, and he will be the reason that if Tennessee loses this game, it's because of him. It's at Vandy, right? We all know how Saban jinxed Alabama earlier in the year, saying that it's almost like playing another home field. Well, they've proven that wrong multiple times, and I'm hoping Tennessee's not looking at this like a trap game. I don't see how they could, given the fact that Vandy has played really, really well this year when nobody expected them to. What do we say? They've won what 2 games the last 2 seasons before this.
Something like that. It's not good.
It, and all of a sudden they're bowl eligible and fighting for a lot more respect. Doesn't make any sense. I'm taking Tennessee, but this is not going to be a game that Tennessee can take very lightly. I think if they stumble for a second, Pavia and the rest of the Vandy crew are going to really take advantage of that.
You know, you say that, but when you watch Pavia play, and this is nothing insulting on Pavia, he's very efficient and effective. He plays a similar style of play to like a Riley Leonard. It's a lot of stuff underneath. It's a lot of, just find it and get it 5 to 10 yards kind of stuff. He's not necessarily hitting the bang bang Hendon Hooker long shots on every other play. That's not really his style of ball. That said, if Vandy is able to find the time of possession that they had against Alabama and Tennessee and LSU, or sorry, and Texas and LSU, it's that's a team to be reckoned with. The real winning criteria here is time of possession. If Vandy has it for more than 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, I'd probably
I,
say they won the game.
I really think this game could be like 24-20. I think it could be pretty close on either side. I don't think Tennessee wins by a lot. I don't think they lose by a lot if it does go that way either.
What's your pick? Tennessee?
Yeah. Who are you picking?
I wrote TBD.
Can't do that.
Is that Vandy? I'll do it. I'll take Vanderbilt.
You're taking Vandy. Okay.
I will take Vanderbilt to beat Tennessee at Vanderbilt at the greatest home field in the entire country.
Greatest home field advantage in the entire country. Bold
That is
statement.
it.
I like it. Take us over to UGA.
You got it. Georgia is not Miami. That's all I got.
They're playing Georgia Tech, by the way.
Yeah, no, Georgia is not Miami. You're not going to run it for 300 yards on Georgia. I'm
No.
sorry. You're not going to have the ball for 40 minutes. I'm sorry. If Carson Beck can start the game like we know he's capable of doing, this game's out of reach early.
Yeah. I
I don't
think
see it.
UGA. I think they could beat Tech by more than they beat whoever it was last week. Was it UMass that they had last week? Yeah. This is not going to be a close game.
Yeah.
So,
And I think too, if you're Georgia, you know you're going to the conference title. I think
yep.
you have to play
This is
well
a
and
clincher.
fast.
Yeah,
Yeah, get your
this is a
players
cleanup
off the
game for
field.
them. Yeah, they gotta get off the field, avoid some injuries, and they gotta go up early so that they can put in their second string. That's
Yep,
probably the game plan.
agreed.
So, okay, over to I think could be the best game of the week. We got Texas at Texas A&M. The reason this is going to be very exciting, not even talking about the implications for the SEC championship. This is at Kyle Field. It's going to be the hardest environment that Texas has played in all year, probably. And Texas has been, I'm just going to say, okay the last month. Right? They've had a couple good wins. They've had some success, but the level of talent they have versus how they have won the last few games doesn't match up. They've played it way too close. Again, this is a rivalry game. They are the better team, but they have to go out there and show that. Okay? I'm gonna take Texas in this game because on paper they are 100% the better team. They're way more talented. A&M looked really really bad this past week against Auburn. I think that they're going to come in a little bit more beat up than fired up on this one. So I'm going to take Texas in this one.
I think A&M's missing a bit of steam after the South Carolina loss a couple of weeks ago, and now you've
Yeah.
lost to Auburn. It's just not quite feeling like the same program that it was. Texas needs to play up to the standard that they are capable of playing. When I think of teams and the level of capability that they have just at every skill position on the field, there are two teams that stick out above all others as far as just sheer talent that they have on the field. That is Texas and that is Ohio State. There is no one better at filling every position on the field. Texas has not played up to that standard, I don't feel, the entire season.
No.
Maybe super early on in the first couple of weeks, definitely not since Georgia. You need to start getting that back. This is a must win for Texas, and I really think you need kind of an emphatic win.
You
Uh,
need a big win here, especially if you're gonna possibly go to the SEC championship after that. You need a statement.
if they do win, they go to the SEC title.
Right.
Um, yeah, my pick on this one is Texas as well. If A&M had beaten Auburn handily like I kind of expected them to last week, I would feel differently. I think Texas will take care of it at home.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into our favorite section, which is going to be our special picks.
Oh,
Where
this one's mine. This is my favorite
I
game of the
know.
week.
I'm just telling the people what it is. All right, this is where we both get to pick one game that is not in the top 12 right now, but we just think is really cool or has some kind of cool implications. So, Cameron, your special pick. Go ahead.
I'm always the special pick. All right. So if your favorite game is that Texas at A&M game, uh, I love this matchup, and I will be watching this. South Carolina at Clemson. I alluded to how good I think South Carolina is earlier. Them and Florida are the only two teams in the country that, well, actually, South Carolina is ranked. I don't think that their ranking is appropriate given how good they look. I would put them above Alabama, even with the direct head to head win. If Alabama had played South Carolina, I think we would have lost handily on their field. I think Cade Klubnik will need a huge game to have an opportunity to win. Clemson has started the season, they got killed by Georgia. Then they went on just a miraculous run. Then they got destroyed by Louisville at home, and they really never refound an offensive or a defensive identity. They almost lost to Virginia last week. Meanwhile, you have a South Carolina team that just knocked off A&M and has been playing up every single week for the last 6-8 weeks. I mean, they look really good. And honestly, outside of a questionable call against LSU, and like I mentioned, Alabama, they could be 11-1 right now, or sorry, 10-1 right now. This is not a team to mess with. I think this is South Carolina all day long.
Yeah, this is another one of those games that I do think could go either way. If this were at South Carolina, this would be a really easy decision. On the flip side, Dabo just knows how to beat South Carolina, especially at home. I don't even remember the last time he lost to South Carolina.
Oh,
And
I can
South
find it.
Carolina, yeah, well, South Carolina is one of those teams. Yeah, they're a couple plays away from being really good and having a great record this entire season, but they haven't finished those really big games in order to do it. And I don't think they're going to do it here either. This is at Clemson. It's another rivalry game, and Clemson people, they just hate South Carolina, right? They don't really have that big rival in the ACC like you have across the other conferences. This is their big game, and I think Dabo's going to show up with his team, and he's going to take it.
So you mentioned the last time that South Carolina beat Clemson. That was 2 years ago at Clemson, 31-30. I think
Okay,
this is it again.
interesting. All right, well, we'll see. Over to my special pick, and this will be kind of interesting. I've got Kansas State at Iowa State. And the reason that I picked this one is because of the implications for their championship game over in the Big 12. If Kansas State beats Iowa State is out of the championship game. And keep in mind, Kansas State, they're not ranked, but they have 8 wins on the season, and they have some pretty good wins too. That being said, Iowa State, they've got some pretty bad losses, and they're still ranked up there. I'm going to take Iowa State in this. They are the better team, but if Kansas State wants to come in and ruin somebody's season and make sure that Iowa State has no chance of making it anywhere near the playoffs, this is the game that they're going to do it. I would not be surprised if Kansas State comes into this one and absolutely destroys Iowa State. I don't think it's going to happen just because they've got the home field advantage. Iowa State's playing for a lot more than just the conference championship on this one. So I think they're going to come out. They're going to come in strong and beat Kansas State.
I think Kansas State wins. I think this is a late season game. Kansas State's been getting up later in the season this year. Iowa State started off incredible. I think they got up to like a number 12 seed. Really looking excellent. And since then have just iteratively dropped. I think this is Kansas State. I don't think they have enough in the tank to be able to pull this off in Iowa. It's a fun game to watch, though.
I'm confused. Who are you picking?
I'm picking Kansas State.
Okay, gotcha. So they do have enough steam to take off Iowa.
Iowa State doesn't have enough steam.
Got it.
To make it, yeah.
All right, look at us being different on multiple picks this.
I love this.
Yeah, hopefully it's like last week, and I beat your record pretty easily.
By one. I was 1 point away from winning.
Win's a win.
Win is a win. I acknowledge that. But if you say that, you're better than me, I called a near upset. I was so close, and yes, it was near, but oh my God, I was right there.
We called an actual upset the week before, so we don't need to talk about it. All right, let's go on to our last section of this episode. We're gonna go ahead and pick the who's gonna make each conference championship game going into this last week. We're gonna come back later on once these are finalized and pick who's actually gonna win these games. But going into this, first up, we've got the Mountain West, which we'll have you go ahead and start covering.
Why did we pick the Mountain West?
That would be because Boise State. And Boise State has a real shot and a very probable shot at being in the playoffs.
So bigger reason.
And hold on, sorry. Once again,
they're the highest rated G5 team. One team has to get in.
Yeah, just to talk about that real quick. One of the things with the playoffs, a lot of people are confused about this. They think it's just the Power 5 conferences that get an automatic bid. It is the highest rated or highest ranked conference champion. That is across the country. That is not just the Power 5. So go ahead.
The reason I ask you that weird question, I have Boise State losing this week. That makes this a real weird thing for I don't actually believe that the Mountain West is going to have representation. I actually think we may be looking at Tulane, which I believe is the Atlantic Coastal Conference, the AAC. I'm happy to give my pick on this one. I think if Boise State wins.
You just spelled ACC, by the way.
Oh, you're right. I did.
Either way, go ahead.
The AAC.
Go ahead.
So if we're picking the Mountain West, I think it's UNLV and Boise State.
Yeah.
I don't really think anybody else is in the running there to actually make it. If we look at the AAC, which is Army and Tulane, I think that may also be your two teams there, and those would be my two G5 picks.
Yeah, yeah. I also have Boise State and UNLV. UNLV, all they have to do is win this week because they hold the tiebreaker versus Colorado State
Mm-hmm.
in that conference. So it's probably gonna be Boise State, UNLV. Really, not that interesting of a championship. Let's be really honest. Over to the Big 12.
ACC.
This is a different one. So Big 12, they have 9 teams that are still in contention for this. Now, all that said, there's a lot that happens or that would have to happen to have 9 teams go in, and this is going to be a theme, I think, with the rest of the conference champions. There's so much chaos in college football that you have had to go down to like rule 4 or 5 with ties in order to pick these games, and I don't know, it makes no sense, and all of these are going to have to be reworked over the next couple of years. Like I said, 9 teams still in contention. That being said, I think it's going to be Arizona State versus Iowa State. Like I said, Iowa State has to take care of business against Kansas State, and Arizona State just has to not lose at this point. They beat BYU, and then they followed that up this past week with a win against, was it Kansas? Or no, Kansas beat Colorado. They beat somebody. Anyways,
They beat
either way,
BYU.
BYU. Well, that was a week before.
No, that was last week.
That was Kansas. Yeah. Anyways, this is another team. It's just kind of fun that we get to talk about them because they were not on anybody's radar the entire year. Now they're ranked, and they're projected to be ranked, I think, like 14. So there's a real chance that if Arizona State wins out and wins the conference champion, we're going to be talking about them as possibly the 11 or 12 seed.
Yeah, for me, I see Arizona State and Colorado. I think Colorado's going to be able to pull a win over Oklahoma State. I already have Iowa State losing this week to Kansas State. And BYU, I just haven't had much confidence in. I know we haven't talked about them, but they've had a rough couple of weeks.
Yeah,
So, again, my pick Arizona State, Colorado.
yeah. Colorado definitely gets in if Iowa State loses this week. Um, it's really between them.
Agreed. All right. I know we skipped over, at least alphabetically, the ACC. There's only three teams that are really in contention here. You have SMU, Clemson, and Miami. So I said SMU is going to win this week. I actually think that Miami is going to be upset at Syracuse. That would make this a pretty interesting debate between Clemson and Miami. I don't know how the tiebreakers would work. If I had to pick the better team of those two and Clemson loses their final game of the year, actually, no, I take that back. Clemson is done playing in conference.
Yeah, Clemson's
So,
done.
yeah,
It's
it's
the
SMU and Clemson.
well, but here's the thing. You ready? Louisville. Louisville beat Clemson earlier in the season.
Hmm.
Miami beat Louisville.
But Miami
That's
would
the
have two
tiebreaker.
losses in conference.
Yeah, and wouldn't Clemson just one?
Only one.
All right, that'd be
Correct.
interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got SMU and Miami. Like I said, just because we already we already just talked about that. I think Miami's going to win this game. Uh, but yeah, if that's right. So they both are tied for their record. So if Miami does win this, then the tiebreaker does become that Louisville game. So
So,
as long as Miami takes care of business this week, they're in conference champion and they're playing
what's your
SMU.
pick?
SMU and Miami.
Okay, SMU and Clemson for me. All right, moving to
Over
the
to Big
Big Ten.
Ten. Yeah, Big Ten. I don't think this one is really going to be that hard. I think it's going to be a rematch between Oregon and Ohio State in this one. Ohio State's winning out. Oregon's winning out. All the tie breaks are done at that point, and this could be this could be the best conference championship of all of them. It's a rematch. Oregon won the first go around, but Ohio State has looked significantly better since that happened. But yeah, the two of them are going to be in a shootout.
I also want to point out this is basically a home field advantage, being an Indy for
Yeah.
Ohio State.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's not really much to pick on other than the two teams in this one. I mean, Oregon and Ohio State are the only two that qualify.
Yeah, yeah. This will the that championship alone has an episode that could be all its own because that'd be a fun one.
Oh boy. So now we get to talk about the mess that is the Southeastern Conference, the SEC.
And I want to preface this with two things. Number one, you and I were sitting up in Knoxville after the UTEP game when Alabama was playing Oklahoma. Things were so simple before that game.
I
I'm
was
not gonna
wearing a
say
Miners shirt, please.
not gonna say simple, but okay. That nobody wants to be in the SEC championship except for Georgia, who's already a lock. Nobody wants to be there because there's a very realistic chance that anybody that plays in that game, if they lose, they're knocked out. So go ahead with your pick.
I think we're going to talk about this next week when we are discussing winners and losers and what the next steps need to be. In my opinion, it is an honor to get to go and play in a conference title. Penalizing a team, I don't care if they don't show up in that game at all, is completely wrong on every level possible.
Agreed, especially because the emphasis with this 12-team playoff was trying to make the conference championship a big part of it. So to strive to make it to only have the opportunity to get knocked out
The fact that
is
it's a debate right now of not
yeah,
having an SEC title game because it potentially knocks out more of your teams for television rights issues, I'm
yep,
sorry. You need to go ahead and just make it a rule. This game counts as a bye. It does not count negatively against your record.
yeah,
End of story.
yep. Don't
Um,
worry, everybody. We'll fix the playoffs in a future episode.
oh, yeah. Okay, so SEC. We have, I believe it's four total teams that are actually in contention. We've got Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and A&M. Any one of those four teams can theoretically play their way in. Georgia is actually, I think Georgia's already a lock. In fact, Georgia is a lock. They
Georgia's a
are a
lock.
one,
Yep.
yeah, they're a two SEC game lock or two SEC team loss lock. The other three being Texas, Tennessee, and A&M. Texas and Texas A&M play this week. The only way that A&M wins is in a Tennessee loss and an A&M win. If Tennessee beats Vanderbilt and A&M wins, Tennessee gets to go in over A&M. If Texas beats Texas A&M, it doesn't matter what happens in the Tennessee game, it's a rematch of Georgia Texas. All of that said, I believe this will be a Texas Georgia rematch in Atlanta.
100%. Yeah, totally agree. This conference is just all over the place right now. There's a lot of what ifs, and if A and I haven't looked at the times of the games yet, but if A&M and Texas is before some of those other games, a lot of eyes are going to be glued to a lot of different games going on. I agree with your picks. I think it's going to be UGA and Texas in this game, and we're going to have another rematch, just like in the Big Ten.
That is a 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central kickoff in College Station for you.
All right, cool.
But
So
yeah,
those are the picks. Cameron, you want to close us out?
happy to. Glad we could be bringing video back today. This is a
Yeah,
nice change of pace. I know we've done a
yeah,
couple of episodes just over on Spotify. If anybody wants to go back and reference information that's now completely invalid, you're more than welcome to do so. Otherwise, we're going to try better going forward to get these out earlier in the week, allow more time for degenerative gambling, and really appreciate the time. Thank you.
all right.
Oh!
Gosh, I hope it didn't stop recording.
Me too.
By the way, I'll just let you know. I don't. It's not like that big a thing, but